Issues behind the revolution. Setting the scene. George III became King of England in 1760 after the death of his grandfather, George II. At age 22, George III was very young to assume the leadership. The new king had promised the quick end of the long war with France, which was accomplished in the Treaty of Paris, 1763. The British government's problems in North America were far from over. However, Britain's attempt to control the colonies through laws and to exploit them through taxes, causing growing resentment among colonists. I'm just going to explain this very quickly. Well, Britain attempted to control the colonies by putting laws and laws and laws and laws and laws. Like for example, they thought they didn't have control in some situations, so they imposed a law that made them have control again. And the way that they were succeeding, and the thing that was getting more resentment in the colonists was the taxes growth and growth and growth. Every I don't know, like every short time, the tax was greater. Although most colonists viewed themselves as loyal British subjects, they respected very much the king, that in this case was George III. They have like resentment because the Britain laws were like not in their favor. Pennsylvania lawyer John Dickinson warned that Britain's policies presented a threat to the colonists.
Respond, the Ottawa Huron, Potawatomi, and other Indians in the Great Lakes region rebelled. Europeans named the uprising Pontiac's Rebellion. In October, King George issued the Proclamation of 1763. This order closed the region west of the Appalachian Mountains to all settlement by colonists.
Burning and deafening Britannic space empire contribute greatly to this burden. White Britain is struggled with its heavy debts and tax. Its colonies in America were prospering. He has a Britain's money manager, reveling ignorance the interests of the colonies. This will be in addition to enforcing the duties of tax on imports, which has been in place for years.
In March 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act. This law placed a tax on newspaper, legal documents, and most other printed materials. It requires that an official government stamp be printed on it or attached to these materials. The Stamp Act marked the first time that the British government taxed colonists for the stamp purpose of raising money. Of course, the Sugar Act was really a way to raise money too. People in England had been paying a stamp tax since 1694. Yet, because the law represented such a radical change for the colonists, Grenville was cautious about introducing the tax. So he took his time. He also allowed the colonists to distribute the stamps themselves. Having taken these careful steps, Grenville was unprepared for the firestorm of protest. For a number of reasons, the reaction in the colonies against the Stamp Act was widespread and extreme. Most important, the measure touched all Americans in every colony. The new law also directly affected some of the most powerful people in the colonies: printers, merchants, and lawyers. In October 1765, delegates from 9 colonies met in New York to hold a meeting that became known as the Stamp Act Congress. The main organizer of the meeting was James Otis.
The most active of these groups was the Boston Sons of Liberty. Once, the members of the Sons of Liberty visited the person who distributed stamps in Boston, and they warned him that unless he resigned, his house will be immediately destroyed and his life will be in continual danger. Nights later, the mob attacked, and it destroyed everything or carried off everything that was inside. That made the stamp distributors take anger and made them fear. So most of them resigned, and they could not do anything, so a lot of Stamp Act was to take effect. In 1766, finally, the Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was repealed. The Parliament had passed the Declaratory Act that measured that the Parliament had the authority to make laws that applied to the colonists in all cases whatsoever. This made so angry the Americans that they started to protest, and the violence began again. It made a little difference, Americans said, whether Britain raised money through trade duties or direct taxes. Either way, the colonists were being taxed without their consent. This change will weaken the legislatures and undermine self-government in the colonies.
In violent resistance to the Townshend Acts, Britain sent troops to Boston, where officials feared a rebellion was at hand. A series of minor clashes occurred as the Sons of Liberty openly opposed the presence of the troops. On an evening on March 5, 1770, a small but unruly crowd threatened a squad of British soldiers. The soldiers had to open fire, killing and injuring more than 5 people. This attack was called the Boston Massacre. The next day, authorities arrested a British officer and 8 soldiers and charged them with murder. Samuel Adams' cousin, John Adams, and another Boston lawyers agreed to defend them. John Adams was also a harsh critic of British policy. However, he believed that the soldiers deserved a fair trial. That's why 7 of them were found not guilty, while 2 were convicted or less harmful crimes. Their thumbs were branded as punishment and they were released. Soon after the Boston Massacre, Parliament cancelled the Townshend taxes. It kept only the duty on tea as a reminder.
May 1773, in a move to help the struggling British East India Company, Parliament passed the Tea Act that stated that the company had the right to sell its tea in America without paying normal taxes. Colonists, especially tea merchants, protested. Once, the several colonial port cities refused to let the ships dock. On the night, colonists disguised as Indians boarded 3 tea ships in Boston. As a large crowd watched, they broke open every crate on board and dumped the tea into the harbor. As a punishment, the Parliament passed a series of laws known as the Coercive Acts. One of the laws limited town meetings to once a year. Another suspended the Massachusetts General Court. Because the measures seemed so harsh, the colonists labeled them the Intolerable Acts. Committees and of correspondence in several colonies gathered, and this became known as the First Continental Congress. Delegates came from every colony but Georgia, and they had a wide range of viewpoints. This Congress adopted a number of measures. Among these were a renewed boycott of British goods and a call to the people of all the English colonies to arm themselves from militias. At the same time, the delegates made a direct appeal to the king, outlining their grievance and asking for understanding. On October 26th, the Congress ended, and they agreed to see each other again if this problem was not resolved. The king had called them rebels, but the Americans preferred the term patriots. They were fighting for their land. So they started to gather militia things like guns and everything they could to fight against the king. The king knew about this, so he wanted to destroy everything he could. So that he started to plan this battle against them, so they could destroy everything militia related they had. So they went, but it was supposed to be a secret. But the Boston rebels knew about this, so they went and warned them about it, so they could hit some things, and they could. When the British went there, they found some things, but they couldn't, they said, "We will do no harm, but please stop fighting and rebelling against the king." But someone from the Patriots should. So they started to fight. In the end, 9 rebels lay dead on the ground. In the end, it became a win for the British army. But it was an exhausting winning. So it began something called the Revolutionary War that will lead to the independence of the United States of America.